Senator Kennedy of Louisiana is recognized.
Madam Secretary, I've watched you for years, even before I came to Washington. And
Excuse me, Bob. It's okay.
when I have time, I do. I enjoy reading your speeches. I think you're what cool looks like. You're a good sport to go out every day and try to defend Bidenomics. It's like trying to defend a fungal infection. Bidenomics is really just paying more to live worse, isn't it?
I certainly wouldn't agree with that characterization. Bidenomics first tried to address the pain that households were experiencing because of the pandemic and to help them survive it. Small businesses, households, people who had lost their jobs, to prevent the kind of scarring we saw after the financial crisis. And as the economy began to recover, and we quickly, of all advanced countries that experienced the pandemic, no country has done better than the United States in quickly having a labor market recovery, resuming growth, and we have the largest real wage increases of any advanced country. And then medium term, Bidenomics is focused on helping middle-class families lead better lives, address the problems that they have, create jobs
I could
in
interrupt
areas.
you, Madam Secretary, because I've only got 5 minutes. Good try. These high prices are here to stay, aren't they? Let me amend that, Madam Secretary. These high prices caused by Bidenomics are here to stay, aren't they?
Well, the high prices were not caused by Bidenomics. We suffered a pandemic that resulted in severe dislocations.
Yes, ma'am, but if I could ask you, they're here to stay, aren't they?
I don't expect the level of prices to go down, but the rate of inflation.
So they're here to stay.
Well, some prices will be higher than they were before the pandemic and will stay higher, but wages have risen considerably, and the pace of price increases has now receded. Over the last 6 months, the measure of inflation the Fed focuses on has been running exactly at
But if your
2%,
wages
and wages are going up.
If you don't get a pay raise, you're screwed. I mean, there's a difference between disinflation and deflation. Y'all talk about disinflation, which I'm happy to have. Disinflation means inflation is going down. It means prices are rising less rapidly than they were. But that's a far cry from deflation, which means the level of these high prices caused by Bidenomics are here to stay. Here's what Jay Powell just said on February 4th. He said, he was asked the question, inflation is one thing, prices are another, and I wonder if there's any reason to believe that people will see the prices of things decline. And here's what Chairman Powell said. So the prices of some things will decline, others will go up, but we don't expect to see a decline in the overall price level. That doesn't tend to happen in economies, except in very negative circumstances. He's talking about a recession. It'll take a recession to get these prices down.
Well, we don't have to get the prices down
we
because
don't?
wages are going up, and a metric that is worth knowing is that the median American house worker
But let me stop you
is
because I'm
able
going to get cut
to
off.
buy
You don't
the-
think we need to get these prices down? You think it's okay that bacon's up 20% under President Biden? Chicken's up 23.5%. Coffee's up 30%. Gas is up 44%. New cars and trucks are up 20% because people can't afford that's used cars because people can't afford a new car. They're up 24% under Bidenomics. You don't think we need to get these prices?
Wages are also up, and wages are up
They're
more.
not up 24%. They're not
Well-
up 27%. They're not up 23. They're not
Well, what,
up
I'm
31.
sorry, but what is,
People are really getting
What-
good at barely getting by because of Bidenomics.
look, American households have many pressures on their budgets, and President Biden is devoted to doing what we can as an administration, whether it's health care costs, insulin copays, energy costs, to getting these prices down and to helping American households afford a decent middle-class life. But what is true is that the median worker in the United States, if you compare today with 2019, can buy the same basket of goods with $1,400 left over to save or spend. So Americans, on average, are better off in spite of the fact that the level of prices is higher.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy.
Good try, Madam.
Honestly, I believe Senator Kennedy still has a first-round opportunity, and I understand Senators Booker and Ossoff would like a second-round opportunity. Senator Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, how are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you
Good.
again, Senator.
I'm a big fan. Director Peters, you're the director of the Bureau of Prisons, is that right?
That's correct, sir.
You used to run the correction system in Oregon, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Oregon legalized drugs, is that right?
That's correct.
Oregon's about to reverse that, is that correct?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the policy proposed to reverse that.
Oh, you just ignored Oregon?
Oregon still has a very special place in my heart, sir.
Okay. You haven't read any of the articles about the reversal?
I haven't, Senator.
You don't know anything about it?
Correct, sir.
Okay, wow. You're in charge of implementing the First Step Act, Director?
That's correct.
How many criminals have you released under the First Step Act?
So First Step Act for the overall release since the initiation of the First Step Act is, I have that exact number in front of me.
You don't know off the
Thought I
top of
did.
your head?
Sorry, Senator. So 70% of those that were released, we have about 30,000 individuals that have been released since the passage of the First Step Act.
All right, so you've released 30,000 criminals under the First Step Act. Okay? And how many of them, before you released them, did you contact any of their victims to say we're about to let this guy out?
Senator, it's my understanding that that notification happens through the U.S. Attorney's Office, but I will check into that and get back to you.
You don't know?
Senator, I don't.
Have you followed up with the U.S. attorneys to say, do you have a system to say, hey, we're about to let this guy out? Would we want to be sure the victim's contacted?
As a former victim's advocate, I share that value, that victim notification should happen. I'll check on the process. And I'll
But
get
you
back
don't
to
know if it's happening.
That's correct, Senator.
Wow. Okay, of the 30,000 criminals you let free, how many of them have come back? Have committed a crime again, hurt somebody else?
So that number is one that we're still looking at as it relates to the recidivism rate for those that were released on the First Step Act.
You don't have any idea?
No, Senator.
You don't have anybody at the Bureau that can count?
I do not have that number in front of me today.
So let me get
Senator.
this straight. The First Step Act was passed in 2018. This is 2024. Am I right so far?
That's correct.
That's 6 years. And in 6 years, you've let 30,000 criminals go, right?
That's correct.
And you don't have the slightest idea how many of them committed another crime and came back.
I don't have that number in front of me today,
And you
sir.
run the Bureau of Prisons.
That's correct.
And how many employees do you have?
About 40,000 employees.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. General, I know you got a lot to do, but could you give us a hand here? And let's find out whether the First Step Act worked. And how many, if we've released 30,000 criminals after 6 years, our director here doesn't know how many have committed another crime and come back? Can you help us?
Senator, I can certainly follow up on that issue. I will just say in terms of work we've done in the past, for example, on compassionate release, and going to the Bureau of Prisons, this is before Director Peters was there, and asking them for data on compassionate release, because that was one of the issues that has come up. How
Excuse me
frequent
for
is it
interrupting, but I'm
Yeah.
not talking about compassionate release.
No, I understand.
You know,
I'm
my
just saying-
colleagues said, we were told that it would save money and it would be in the interest of public safety to release criminals from prison. I didn't vote for it, but the majority rules. And so Congress did it. And Ms. Peters, Director Peters at the Bureau of Prisons, and her colleagues released 30,000 criminals, all of whom are there for a reason, okay? They didn't just go to prison for a free toaster. They were there for a reason. And so her department let them go, and after 6 years, we don't have the slightest idea. Not a single one of the 40,000 of her employees know how many have committed a second crime and come back. So how the hell are we supposed to figure out whether it worked? Your people ought to hide their head in a bag, Director, that you can't come here in front of this Congress and answer that question. I'm sorry, I interrupted you with my speech.
No, that's okay. I was just going to, my bottom line point on it was, I've often looked to those questions on things like compassionate release and other programs. And one of the challenges we found is the department just doesn't have good data on that. Halfway houses. Congress is spending about $500 million a year on halfway houses. There's really not great recidivism data on that either. How well are they working?
Before we do this, we need to find out. Look, I believe in justice. I believe in treating everybody fairly. But there are people out there, I don't know why, if I make it to heaven, I'm going to ask. They're not mixed up. They're not confused. They're not sick. It's not that their mama or daddy didn't love them or not enough. They just hurt other people, and they take other people's stuff, and we have to separate them from society. And the director let 30,000 of these folks go and can't tell me today how many have come back. I just find it takes my breath away. With 40,000 people. How many of your 40,000 people are actually coming to work or are still working from home, Director?
The supermajority of our employees come to work every day because we're running 24/7
What percentage are coming to work every day?
The percentage is quite high. I don't have the exact
You don't
number,
know?
But
Well, maybe there's your problem.
the supermajority of our individuals come
If they're
to
not
work
coming
at
to
our
work, they
institutions.
can't give us the answer. I've gone over. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. This is why people hate government and don't trust government.
So I'd like to respond concerning the Grassley-Durbin First Step Act signed into law by President
I
Donald
thought
Trump.
you might have a response.
By President Donald Trump. I almost want to repeat that because this notion that it's soft on crime, I don't consider Chuck Grassley soft on crime. I don't consider Donald Trump soft on crime. Let me tell you the numbers that we have. Some 30,000 released. The recidivism rate for people released under the First Step Act is 12.4%. 7 out of every 8 individuals released under the law have not been rearrested or charged with a new crime. By comparison, DOJ estimates that in the decade before the First Step Act was passed, 43% of the people formerly incarcerated in BOP were rearrested within 3 years of their release. Is the First Step Act working? I would submit it is.
Would you yield for a question, Mr. Chair?
When I finish.
I'm sorry. Excuse me for interrupting.
The point I'm making is we decided with the Trump administration and Senator Grassley's leadership that we were going to take a different approach to releasing people from prison. We would give them an opportunity to be trained, educated, skilled, in many ways more prepared for release, because 80%, I believe, in the system are going to be released someday. We don't want to commit another crime or create another victim. I would submit this is a success. Don't put your head in a bag, or whatever Senator suggested. Stand up tall and try to make it better, and I'm ready to do that. But the First Step Act was a constructive reform of the penal system, and I think it was a good idea and stand by it. I'll submit to your question.
Thank you. And I appreciate, as usual, Dick, you make good points. Here's my point. I didn't vote for the First Step Act because I was afraid this was going to happen. And what I hear you saying is that of the 30,000 that the director released, over 3,000 committed another crime in her back. Here's my question. How come you know that and she doesn't?
Because she's probably looking
And the
for.
40,000 people at the Bureau of Prisons who are supposed to give us this information don't know?
I'd like to say in all fairness, she's under oath, and I think when you ask for numbers, she wants to make sure she tells you a number she can live with. I have this information. I think it's probably close to being 100% accurate, but I wouldn't say under oath it is. So I think give her a fair opportunity to respond. I mean, it just might not be the type of thing that comes
But
rolling
you're
off
not,
the tongue.
it's not your job, and I appreciate the information, and I'd like to see the study that shows that. I just don't understand why the director has no idea.
Well-
She didn't say she was uncertain, and she wanted to go back and check. She said, I don't know. And I just find that extraordinary.
I'm assuming since she's under oath, that it's an honest answer. We have two other individuals who are seeking a second round. I believe Senator Booker is first.
I hate to distract from my questions, but I just want.
Thank you, Senator Smith. Senator Kennedy of Louisiana is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for being here. Thank you for your services. I think I've said before, I believe you and your team probably saved the world economy during the pandemic economic meltdown when the whole world wanted dollars by establishing the currency swap line. So I thank you for that. You gave an interview, Mr. Chairman, on February 4th of this year to CBS, 60 Minutes, I think. Is that right?
Yep.
I ordered a transcript of that hearing, which I read. I learned a lot reading it. You were asked a question about inflation, and you asked a question about prices declining. And here was your response. I'd like to quote you, if it's okay. Quote, so the prices of some things will decline, others will go up, but we don't expect to see a decline in the overall price level. That doesn't tend to happen in economies except in very negative circumstances. End quote. Did I quote you accurately?
I believe you did.
Okay. Later in the interview, you were asked about the national debt. Do you recall that?
I don't actually, but I'm sure that's right.
Okay. Well, at least according to the transcript, your answer was, and again, I'm quoting you, in the long run, the United States is on an unsustainable fiscal path. The U.S. federal government's on an unsustainable fiscal path. And that just means that the debt is growing faster than the economy. So it is unsustainable, end quote. Do you remember saying that?
I've said that many times. I think that's uncontroversial.
Okay. Later in the interview, you said, I want to quote, you know, I would just say this, integrity is priceless. And at the end, that's all you have. And we plan on keeping ours, end quote. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, it is.
Okay. That's why I want to ask you about the FDIC. Have you read the article in the Wall Street Journal entitled, quote, Strip Clubs, Lewd Photos, and a Boozy Hotel, the Toxic Atmosphere at Bank Regulator FDIC, end quote?
I think I did read that a couple months ago.
Did you read the article entitled, I quote again, FDIC lawyer stayed on paid leave for weeks after child porn arrest, end quote?
I don't remember that one.
Okay, did you read the article entitled, also in the Wall Street Journal, quote, FDIC chair, known for temper, ignored bad behavior in workplace, end quote?
Honestly, I don't. I read so much, you know, I can't, I remember the broad story, but not particular stories.
Did you read the article in which a former female employee of the FDIC allegedly recalled her male colleagues saying women needed to use sex to get ahead at the FDIC?
I do not recall that. No.
Okay. Did you read the article in which a female risk management examiner during a lunch with a male examiner said she had become friendly with that examiner, and he complained to her about his marriage, allegedly, telling her he wasn't getting enough sex. And she allegedly said, quote, obviously if I walked, or he allegedly said, obviously if I walked into this office and you were naked, I'd fuck you right here, end quote.
I do not remember that, and I think I would.
Okay. Do you remember the article about Mr. Randall Ditch, a supervisory examiner in Denver, who allegedly was demoted in 2014 to a non-supervisory examiner position in Tulsa after having sex twice with a subordinate female employee and a number of other rule violations? In this article, it says, allegedly, Mr. Ditch had urged the woman to not, quote, be a pussy, close quote, and drink a shot of whiskey during work hours, the records show. Do you recall that?
I do not recollect that.
Okay.
No.
Here's my question. I could go on for a while.
Could go on, but you're not going to go on, so you've passed your 5 minutes. Do your question once.
Sir?
Senator Kennedy, your time's already expired. You can do one. You did 5 minutes, consume the whole 5 minutes with your monologue of,
Well, you did 6 minutes. I timed it.
I asked my,
You did 6 minutes.
Senator Kennedy, for months, I have let you go way over the 5 minutes. You get your question,
But you did 6 minutes.
I chair this committee.
I understand. You still did 6 minutes. Check the record.
I'm going to order, you're going to be at 6 minutes and 15 seconds if you continue this argument,
Well,
or
that's
you're going to ask your question.
I'll ask my question. I just wanted the record to be clear, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in light of these allegations, if they're proven, how can the FDIC lead this charge for Basel Endgame 3, which is going to turn the banking community upside down?
I don't know how I would make the connection to Basel III. I'll say it's deeply troubling things, obviously, but again, you know, as your point was, if proven, and I mean, I think we have to decide Basel III on its merits, and we're not looking to the FDIC to lead this, by the way. We're looking at the Fed to do what the Fed thinks is right. That's what we're going to do. We don't look to, and they don't look to us to lead them.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Senator Butler is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Senator Kennedy from Louisiana is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, the Biden administration has operated as Iran's best friend, hasn't it?
No, I disagree completely, Senator.
Well, Iran sold Iraq $10 billion, not million, $10 billion worth of electricity, but Iraq couldn't pay them because of our sanctions against Iran. Biden administration waived those sanctions, didn't it?
Senator, that
So
waiver
that
started under the Trump
Iran could get
administration.
$10 billion. Isn't that a fact?
No, Senator, those waivers started under the Trump administration. That money is still in Iraq. That money has never been to Tehran. It will never go to Tehran.
The first waiver was on July 2023, wasn't it?
Senator, I believe those waivers started in 2018.
The first waiver that the Biden administration did was July of 2023, wasn't it?
So, Senator, again, I believe the waiver program started in.
You didn't issue a waiver on July of 2023,
Senator, the waivers were continued into 2023.
and you issued another waiver to get the money to Iran in November of 2023, didn't you?
Senator, as I said, that money has never been, will never go to Iran. The money is still in Iraq. The money may be used for humanitarian purposes, but not a dollar of that money.
And you issued another waiver on March of 2024, not too long ago. That was 6 weeks after Iran killed 3 American soldiers.
Senator,
You gave Iraq permission to give Iran $10 billion. didn't you?
No, Senator. As I mentioned, this was something that started in 2018 under the Trump administration. It allowed Iraq to purchase electricity and to store that money in Iraq. None of that money to date will ever go to Iran. The money is being held for humanitarian purposes.
You're not telling the truth, Mr. Secretary. No disrespect, but that's just not true. Senator Menendez and Senator Scott made the point. We all know, unless you peaked in high school, you know that money is fungible. You also, the Biden administration also paid Iran $6 billion to release 5 of our prisoners, didn't it?
Senator, again, that money is in Qatar. None of that money has been used. It hasn't been moved. And as I said earlier, while money is fungible in the United States because we care about our people, it's not fungible for the Iranian.
So the money's in Qatar, in a bank in Qatar?
Yes.
Now, what do you think? Who controls that bank in Qatar?
Those banks are controlled by those individuals who run that financial institution.
I see. So if President Biden says Qatar Bank, don't give this money to Iran, and the Qatar government says give the money to Iran, who do you think the Qatar Bank's going to listen to, Mr. Secretary?
So, Senator, those banks in Qatar value greatly their ability to have a relationship with the United States because that's how they make money.
Do you believe in the tooth fairy?
Ultimately, if we cut off those banks, they will no longer be able to make money.
Do you believe in the Easter Bunny?
So, Senator, while I understand your point, fundamentally, none of that money has gone to Iran, and that money is not going to go directly to Iran.
Now, you did the same thing with Maduro, you meaning the Biden administration. You guys did the same thing with Maduro in Venezuela. You removed all the sanctions on oil and mining, including gold, with Maduro, the dictator of Venezuela, didn't you?
So GL 44 and 43 were put in place in Venezuela. 43 has already.
Is that a yes?
GL 43 has been removed.
Yeah, so you said, okay, Maduro, we're going to remove Maduro, best friends with Iran and Cuba and China and Russia. The Biden administration removed the sanctions on oil and mining in Venezuela.
Senator,
And the Maduro said, I promise you that I'll hold a free and fair election. And then he put all his opponents in jail. And the Biden administration has done nothing, hasn't it, except stand there sucking on its teeth.
So, Senator, I want to say again, we provided general licenses. We did not remove the sanctions. The reason we did that was because we did not trust. So what we can do
The
with those
sanctions on Maduro's oil are not there, are they?
General License 44, which gives permission for the sale of oil, expires on April 17th, which will then put those sanctions back in place. We did not remove the sanctions.
The problem you folks have is that you want to quote Socrates in the middle of a bar fight. Iran is not our friend. Venezuela is not our friend. President Biden keeps giving them money to buy weapons to try to kill us.
Senator,
do you not understand that?
Sanctions on the Iranian regime. We have not allowed a dollar from Qatar or from the Iraqi electricity fund to flow to Iran.
That's just not true. Senator Menendez explained that to you.
The money.
How can you be that obtuse?
Senator, as I've said, our goal is to make sure that we take every action to prevent Iran's destabilizing activity in the region. We're going to continue to go after Iran's sale of oil and try and limit their ability as best we can using the tools that you've given us. I'm here before the Senate asking for additional tools that will allow us to continue to do that.
Okay, Senator Kennedy made your point. Senator Warner from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Chair Murray. Senator Kennedy.
Mr. Secretary, I don't hate anybody. I look for grace wherever I can find it. And I certainly don't hate you. My chairman talked about the woolly mammoths in the room. and I'm glad he brought that up. The chairman's immigration bill was negotiated by two members of my party, Senator Langford and Senator McConnell, and I don't speak for either one. They're both good men. The chairman said that the Republicans who negotiated his bill trusted you and wanted you there. And I'm not doubting his word. It gives me no joy to say this, but most Republicans don't trust you. And a vast majority of the American people don't trust you. That's why you've been impeached. Now, my Democratic colleagues are going to try to sweep your impeachment under the rug and violate 200 years of Senate precedent in doing it. I don't think that they will be able to sweep the issue, maybe your impeachment, but not the issue, under a rug as big as the United States of America. Again, it gives me no joy in saying this. I think well more than a majority of the American people think that as a result of your behavior and President Biden's behavior, our southern border is an open, bleeding wound. I think they believe that our southern border is chaotic. I think a vast majority of the American people believe that a lot of it is political. I think a vast majority of the American people believe that it is chaotic by design, and that all of this is intentional. And I think while a vast majority of the American people who don't trust you believe in legal immigration, they don't believe in illegal immigration. And they think you do. And they think President Biden does. And they think that's why the border is open. And they think that your attitude and President Biden's attitude is that while they may be poorer under President Biden, that they're stupid enough to believe you and the president when you say that it's not your problem. I think that needed to be said. Isn't it a fact, Mr. Secretary, that the number of illegal immigrants that you and the president allow into our country counts for congressional district reapportionment?
Senator, I'm not sure I understand your question, but I can surely share with you that I disagree with its phrasing.
Isn't it true, Mr. Secretary, that the number of illegal immigrants that you and President Biden have allowed into our country counts for allocating electoral votes?
Same answer.
Okay. You don't know?
I don't understand your question.
Never crossed your mind?
The notion, Senator, that we intend to allow illegal immigration is nothing short of preposterous.
So you do understand my question?
And if I may, it is disrespectful to the extraordinarily hard work that we perform, and far more importantly, that the personnel in the Department of Homeland Security and across this administration perform to stem illegal immigration, build lawful, safe, and orderly pathways, and invest in a working system. And we only wish that bipartisan legislation, about which I have not heard a critical term,
Mr. Secretary, you're using up my time. You do this every single time. You do this every single time. And it's a fact, and you know it, and I know it, that the more people you allow into our country illegally, the more people are counted for reapportionment. And the more people that you allow into our country illegally, the more people are counted for allocating electoral votes. Now, maybe that's a coincidence, but that's a fact. And you know that. And you've done nothing for 4 years. Nada. Zero.
Absolutely false.
Zilch. And in fact, the only people I know in this country who are better off today than they were 4 years ago are illegal immigrants. And that's as a result of your policy. I don't hate you for it. I don't hate anyone, but that's why you've been impeached. And my colleagues may try to cover it up. They're going to try to cover it up. But they can't cover up the facts. I've gone over my time. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Peters. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Secretary Mayorkas. It's wonderful to see you here today, and I'm going to see you again next week when you come before my committee, the Homeland and Governmental Affairs Committee, and it's good to have an opportunity to ask you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. Mr. Secretary, if the mother is healthy and the baby is healthy, do you really support abortion of the baby up to the moment of birth?
Senator, let me make sure, to the moment of birth, you're saying after gestation, the 40 weeks?
You know what I'm saying, Mr. Secretary.
Well,
let's suppose it's the day before the due date, and the baby is fully formed, and the baby's healthy, and the mother is healthy. Do you support aborting the right to abort the baby then?
I've heard no one say that. I think everyone has said, those who support reproductive rights have said, support Roe versus Wade.
You said it in 2020 in a press release. This is what you said. You said, quote, "No government, state or federal, has the right to make decisions for a woman about her body or her health care," end quote. Your words, not mine.
Good words.
So let me ask you again. Up to the moment of birth, if the mother's healthy and the baby's healthy, do you believe that there should be the right to abort that baby up to the moment of birth?
Again, I'll give you the answer. I have always supported Roe v. Wade, which does not do what you've just said. And I know of no one who is proposing or advocating what you've just announced. And I would hope that what you would recognize is that that should not stop a woman from having the right to decide for herself, with the consultation of her physician, what she should do.
Would you support making it illegal to abort a baby if the mother's healthy and the baby is healthy on the day before that baby is scheduled to be born?
I certainly would support the reestablishment of Roe versus Wade.
Okay. So you think that there are restrictions that the state, federal or state, as the case may be, can place on abortion?
Senator, if you talk to any woman, she'll tell you that she uses common sense in making her decisions.
Do you think that the state or the federal government in the third trimester of a pregnancy has the right to impose limitations, moral and legal right to impose limitations on an abortion? I think that's a yes or no.
I would certainly say that Roe v. Wade answered those questions. We defend and support Roe versus Wade.
Roe v. Wade has been overturned. I want your answer. Do you support restrictions by the federal or the state government on the right to an abortion in the third trimester?
And my answer is clear, that if we establish Roe versus Wade, we get back to a system that gives women protection.
Do you support restrictions to the right to an abortion in the third trimester? Why are you dodging the question?
I'm not. I'm just saying. I'm telling you where I am. I am.
Tell me, do you support restrictions in the third trimester?
I have
if
personally.
If the mother's healthy and the baby's healthy.
Yeah, and Senator, let me try to make sure I answer this. Personally, as you mentioned, I've been quoted on a number of occasions before I became secretary. I support a woman's right to make a decision about her body.
But do you support restrictions in the third trimester? I just asked, why are you embarrassed to answer?
Because I believe in Roe versus Wade, and I think everyone recognizes
you support
that
Roe v.
law.
Wade?
I do.
Roe v. Wade allowed for restrictions in the third trimester.
Then you have your answer.
Do you support restrictions in the third trimester?
If Roe versus Wade is as you described it.
Why are you scared to answer the question?
I'm not afraid to answer. I'm
Are you
asking
worried
the
you're
question.
going to get in trouble with people, with your colleagues
No,
who
not
support
at all.
abortion up to the moment of birth?
Not at all.
Then why won't you answer the question?
Because, Senator, I think I've given you the answer that makes the most sense. Roe versus Wade worked for some 50
Do you
years.
support restrictions in the third trimester on the right to abortion? It's real simple. You're the secretary of a department of the United States of America.
Yeah.
Do you support them or do you oppose them?
My answer is pretty simple. We will
It wasn't
defend
simple.
Roe versus
You don't want
Wade.
to answer it, do you?
I've answered
You
the
know
question.
why you don't want to answer? Because you and your colleagues believe that a child has no rights, even a fully developed child. You know that?
You can say that.
And I know.
I know where I am. I will continue
Okay,
to
let me
defend
ask
a
you
woman's
for a
right.
final time. I think this is number 5.
It's not gonna make any difference, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, if you want to choose to not answer it, that's up to you.
I'm not denying anything.
Let me phrase it another way. What restrictions do you support in the third trimester to the right to an abortion? Tell me what restrictions.
If you read the Roe versus Wade decision, it'll answer your question.
Why don't you just answer it for me?
I did. Roe versus Wade
What
established the
restrictions
protection.
do you support on the right to an abortion in the third trimester? You
Roe versus
personally.
Wade. Roe versus Wade.
Okay. Roe versus Wade doesn't say what restrictions. Roe versus Wade just says the state and the federal government have the right to impose restrictions. I'm asking you, what restrictions you support? For example, if the mother and the baby are healthy, and we're a week before birth, and the parents change their mind and say, we don't want a boy, we want a girl, abort the baby who happens to be a girl, would you support that right?
I know no one who would go as far as what you're indicating,
Well, then why wouldn't you say you would oppose it?
because I'm telling you where I stand.
No,
And I
you're
have
not.
been very
You're
clear on that
dodging
for a
and
long
bobbing
time.
and weaving and flip-flopping like a
Let me
bank
stand as still as
catfish.
you'd like. Senator, I won't move, and
Let me
I'll just
ask
move
you
my
again.
lips.
If a week before birth, baby healthy, mother healthy, would you support the right to an abortion because the parents dislike the gender of the baby? Yes or no?
Yeah, as I said, a woman should have the right
But you
to make the
haven't said,
decisions about
Mr.
her body.
Secretary, you won't answer my question. Would you support that?
As I said, I'm going to do everything I can to support a woman's right to make the
Would you
decisions about
support
her
what I
body.
just described? You're not going to answer me, are you? I don't understand why you're scared to answer me.
I'm not afraid to answer your question. I've answered it over and
You're
over.
scared
Thank you,
to
Senator
death to
Kennedy.
answer me. I just find that appalling. You're the secretary of the department.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy.
Can we have a second round, Madam Chair?
I am just going to start a second round right now. You just hang in here. We're going to start a second round of questioning. We will certainly accommodate any senators who have not yet had their first round who appear. As we know, we have several competing subcommittee hearings at this juncture.
Secretary, how many employees does the Department of Health and Human Services have?
Roughly 90,000, Senator.
And your testimony is that half are back in the office full-time and half aren't?
That the OMB guidance essentially calls for a process where we
I
can have
understand the
physically.
OMB guidance.
Yeah.
Is it your testimony that half are back of those 90,000 are back in the office full-time and half aren't?
My testimony is that we are in compliance with the OMB guidance on how we handle the workforce.
Is it your testimony that half of the 90,000 are back in the office full-time and half aren't?
Again, my testimony is that we are complying with the OMB guidance. We can make sure you know what the guidance is, so
I
you
do
know what we're
the
complying
guidance
with.
is. I'm just trying to understand how you've implemented it. What percentage of your employees are back in the office full-time?
I could try to get that information back
You
to you
don't
because
know?
we have a mix. I came to talk about the budget, but I can try to
You
get
don't
back
have
to
any
you.
idea how many of your 90,000 people are back in the office full-time?
I can tell you the types of mix of employment that we have.
Yeah, but that's what I'm asking. You got 90,000 employees.
That's right.
How many are back in the office full-time? What percentage?
And as
You
I
don't
said,
know?
this is a budget hearing. I came to talk about the budget.
Yeah,
if
but you don't know. You don't know how many of your people are back in the office full-time.
I can get back to you, Senator.
I find
I
that
could get you as
astounding.
best I can a response to that particular question, but I came here to talk about the
Why
president's budget.
is Medicare Advantage so popular?
I'm sorry?
Why is Medicare Advantage so popular?
Why is Medicare Advantage so popular? You'll have to help me with, what do you mean by
You
that?
don't know what Medicare Advantage is?
Absolutely know what Medicare Advantage is.
Yeah,
When
why
you
is
say
it so
popular, is there some survey that you're talking about, or what?
Yeah, I deal in numbers.
Okay.
About half of our seniors who qualify for Medicare choose Medicare Advantage, don't they?
That's actually more than half.
Okay. And why is that? That makes it popular, right?
Medicare Advantage today, this is the first year that we've seen more individuals select plans in the Medicare Advantage.
Why is it
Managed
so
care program.
popular?
Again, when you say popular, I've heard many Medicare beneficiaries who are complaining about being stuck in a Medicare Advantage
Well,
plan.
is it because the average person, average senior on Medicare Advantage pays $2,400 less in premiums on Medicare Advantage as opposed to traditional Medicare, plus gets more services like dental and vision in many respects? Could that have something to do with it, you think?
I'm assuming that you've seen some polling or surveys that give you some of those answers. I've heard many, many things,
No,
both
I've
good and
seen
bad
the,
about
I've
Medicare
seen the
Advantage.
facts. Are you telling me that people on Medicare Advantage don't save money in premiums and copays over traditional Medicare?
I have
Is
no
that your
doubt that some do,
testimony?
but I wouldn't have no doubt that some pay more.
I'm talking about the average.
Again, I don't know what numbers you're referring to, but I'm
looking
more than willing to
at the
discuss
numbers
those with
that your
you.
department puts out.
Okay, then what are those numbers, Senator?
The numbers say that the average person on
I'm asking you if
Medicare
you could show me the
Advantage
numbers.
pays $2,400 less in premiums and copays and gets extra benefits. Is that right?
My understanding is they're also restricted in the doctors they have access to, the hospitals they have access to.
You're trying to destroy Medicare Advantage, aren't you?
We've actually provided an increase in funding for Medicare Advantage.
No, you haven't.
Sure we have.
You cut funding in 2023 by 1.1%.
That's absolutely incorrect.
And you next year you're proposing a 0.16% cut. And in fact, the Medicare.
That's absolutely incorrect.
That's not incorrect.
That's absolutely incorrect.
And in fact, the Medicare trustees.
Senator, saying it doesn't make
the
it true.
Medicare trustees said that you've lost your mind. My words, not theirs.
Senator, saying something doesn't make it true. The dollar amount that we're giving to health insurance
you
companies
have
under
cut.
Medicare Advantage
Are you telling
has
me today that
increased.
you have not cut payments to insurers in Medicare Advantage last year by 1.1%?
We are giving Medicare
denying
Advantage. Health insurance
Are you
companies
denying that?
under Medicare Advantage are receiving more money this year than they got last year from
You
Medicare.
cut them by 1.1%.
That's not a cut, Senator.
And you're proposing another 0.1% cut. In fact, I mean, you and President Biden say you will not touch a hair on the head of Medicare, but you're trying to destroy Medicare Advantage.
Actually,
I mean,
actually, the president's budget extends the life of Medicare
look at
beyond your and my lifetime.
Look at the numbers. In 2023, under your watch, Medicare Advantage patients saw on average a 12% increase in deductible and a 5%
The
increase
insurance
in
companies did that,
premiums.
not us, Senator.
And Florida and Utah and Wyoming saw their premiums go up 50%.
Okay, Senator, blame the insurance companies, not us.
Because you cut the payments
Senator,
to the
we did
insurance
not cut.
companies to drive them to traditional Medicare where you can control them better. Isn't that the case?
The fiction you're propounding doesn't resolve the issue that we have every year so far under this administration increased the funding for health insurance companies who offer these managed care Medicare Advantage plans.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Now I'll recognize Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for your indulgence. Nice to see you again. Thank you for being here. Your current budget by my calculations, is $48.3 billion. Is that right?
The budget request is for $37.8 billion, the FY25 budget, and that would constitute a 3.5% increase over.
But with mandatory spending, your budget's 48.3. Is that right?
I don't have the number for including mandatory, but I'll certainly be able to get back to you for that.
Well, let's take out mandatory.
Yeah.
Your discretionary budget right now is $37.8 billion.
The FY25 request is for 37.8.
That's not what I'm asking.
I'm sorry?
What's your current budget?
Well, it's 3.5% less than that, so I can take out my calculator and do the math, but I don't have it in front of me.
All right, well, let me put it another way. You're asking for an extra $467 million, is that right?
In the increased amount of money that we're asking for, that's approximately right, yes.
Okay. To your knowledge, in the past, let's say 40 years, has the Department of Justice ever come before Congress and said, we don't need any more? We're going to make it with what we've got in light of the fiscal circumstances in the country?
I normally wouldn't want to speculate, but in this case, I can't imagine that the Department of Justice, facing increasing threats every year, violent crime, threats to our national security, drug trafficking threats.
Is that a no?
I don't know the answer, but I think it would be surprising if the department ever asked for less money. I think that would be not responsible.
You talked in a little bit in your testimony, General, about guns, and you've been very outspoken about the need for more gun control. With respect, and if you don't mind me asking, do you own a gun?
I don't.
Okay. Have you ever fired a gun?
Many times.
Okay. Do you have 24-hour security?
I do.
Okay. Let me ask you about fentanyl, because that's a huge problem, and I know you're worried about it, as are we. And we've, of course, got a problem with the precursor chemicals coming into Mexico to the Mexican cartels who manufacture the fentanyl and send it into the United States. Isn't a big part of the problem that if you took the Mexican drug cartels and turned them upside down and shook them, that President Lopez Obrador would fall out of their pockets?
Well, I'll leave the metaphor aside. The department has said that we do not have an investigation of the President of Mexico.
Do you think President of Mexico is our friend?
We need cooperation from Mexico. Mexico has been somewhat cooperative with respect to our fight against the cartels, not as helpful as I wish they were, but without their cooperation, we can't be successful in destroying the cartels.
Why wouldn't the president go to President Lopez Obrador and say, no offense, but the fentanyl problem is killing Americans. The illegal immigration problem is hurting Americans. If you don't cooperate with us, and he clearly hasn't been, and he's not afraid of us, we're going to implement tariffs on Mexico until you do.
I think there are many ways to encourage cooperation from another country.
But that would do it, wouldn't it?
I don't know whether that would do it or whether...
You don't think that would get his attention?
I am not a diplomat. I'm not a foreign affairs strategist. I know we need their support and cooperation.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that would be positive or negative.
So we just ask politely.
Well, we do more than that, but
Right.
considerably more than that.
Let me ask
I don't know the answer to your
Okay.
high-level
Let me ask you one
strategy
last question in my 14 seconds. I've been dying to ask you this question.
How long have you been dying to ask me this question?
Long time. Long time. Mr. Hunter Biden did not pay taxes on $1 million in 2014 and 2015. And he deducted payments from his income tax for personal expenses when he did file. For hookers, for a Lamborghini, for strip clubs, for sex clubs, for porn website memberships. Why did the Department of Justice let the statute of limitations run?
As you well know,
So
Senator.
you can't prosecute?
As you well know, Senator, that investigation is being conducted by Mr. Weiss, who was appointed by President Trump to be the U.S. Attorney in Delaware. Much of the investigation they're talking about occurred during the previous administration under Mr. Weiss. Mr. Weiss has continued his investigations. He's now a special counsel. He will issue a report which
So are
will
you saying
explain
it's
those.
Trump's fault?
Which will explain. No, I don't know whether there's fault or not. Mr. Weiss will explain this in his report.
But we can't. Mr. Hunter Biden walks free on not paying taxes on $1 million from 2014 and 15 because the Department of Justice let it happen, right?
Again, I'm not going to comment on decisions made in a pending investigation. In the end, Mr. Weiss will issue a report. I will provide the report to Congress. You will be able to question Mr. Weiss as to his reasoning, and he will be able to defend his reasoning.
Would you come with Mr. Weiss when he does that?
I'm not going to know the intricacies of Mr. Weiss' investigation. There would be no point. It's Mr. Weiss who's responsible for this investigation.
But you were head of the Department of Justice.
Yes, and I've appointed him as special counsel so that he can independently investigate this matter.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Senator Kennedy. Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Judge, for being here. I appreciate your service.
Wow. Madam Secretary, we need to address that. Welcome. I want to talk about housing. The last 3 years, America has been experiencing inflation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
In fact, under President Biden, the median price for an existing home is up 28%, is it not?
I think that there's been rising housing costs for the past decade.
And the monthly mortgage payment under President Biden is actually up 141%, isn't it?
Housing prices have been going up consistently over the past decade.
And the mortgage rates under President Biden are up 176%, aren't they?
I think the Federal Reserve is trying to do something about inflation.
And electricity, you need electricity to live in a home. Since President Biden took office, the average electricity prices in our country have gone up 29.4%, haven't they?
I know that electrical costs and utilities have gone up consistently over the past several years.
No, ma'am, that's not true. 7 years before President Biden took office, the electricity prices only rose 5%. Now he took over, now they're up 29.4%. It takes building materials to build a house, doesn't it?
It does.
Since President Biden took office, iron and steel are up 28%. Isn't that true?
I don't have that number in front of me.
Okay. Aluminum is up 7%, is it not, under President Biden?
I don't have that either.
Okay. HVAC units, an air conditioner for your home. Under President Biden, an AC system is up 37%, isn't it?
I think the pandemic had something to do with that.
And shingles are up 19%, aren't they?
Same there.
Household appliances are up 22%, aren't they?
Again, I think we had a supply chain issue, and that's reflective in the numbers that you're stating.
And the supply chain issues are solved. Electric wires up 14%, isn't that correct, Madam Secretary?
I don't have that number in front of me, sir.
Okay. Now, this inflation in home prices and building materials that I've just talked about, it's man-made, isn't it? And that man's name is Joe Biden, isn't it?
Senator, I think that we all experience the complexities of a global pandemic, and the economy is still, in many ways, absorbing some of that impact. I think some of the numbers you stated may be entirely true. I don't have it here, but what I do.
Oh, they're true, Madam Secretary. Don't take my word for it.
Very
Ask
good.
the average American.
But it's one of the reasons why, for the past 3 years, the administration has tried to be responsive to these additional costs.
Well, excuse me for interrupting, but I'm like our good chairman, and you need to pay attention to his request, by the way. Mm-hmm. But we've got limited time. This administration hasn't succeeded. Inflation is gutting our middle class like a fish. And the reason housing prices are up so high is because of President Biden's inflation. That's why I find it extraordinary to learn that HUD, under your leadership, has issued a new mandate. All new homes financed or insured by the Federal Housing Administration and HUD, which is most homes in America, have now got to follow the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code standard. The National Association of Home Builders says that this new standard is going to add $31,000 on top of all of this inflation to the cost of a new home. Now, unless you peaked in high school, this is craziness. You're making it worse, aren't you?
Senator.
Are you serious about this rule?
I've been in this industry for many decades, and I will submit to you that some of the housing pressures we see right now is because housing has not been built in almost 20 years.
And you're going to encourage home builders to build by adding $31,000 to their costs, and you're going to encourage people to buy by adding $31,000 to the price tag? Have your people at HUD been living in outer space? Haven't they seen what's been going on in America with inflation and home prices?
There's two costs to home ownership. One is buying the house and operating.
I'm going to allow one last exchange. We're into the second minute overtime.
And what we know is that, and you refer to the increasing cost of utilities, that with this energy code regulation, we are going to reduce utility costs for low and moderate income families across the country.
Do you believe in the tooth fairy?
I dispute the home builders.
Do you believe in the Easter Bunny?
Senator Kennedy, I'll allow you the last word. And then
Do you believe that Jimmy Hoffa died of a natural death?
Okay. Thank you, Senator Kennedy.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Senator.
I will just use. Thank you, Chair Durbin. Senator Kennedy.
Mr. Secretary, I hope you'll hear the pleas from our chair to help the people of Maui. We've been through that in Louisiana. Frankly, I'm disappointed that the administration hasn't done more. I'm not laying that at your feet, but the people of Maui right now need more than anything else hope. And without a place to live, there is no hope. How those babies? How your babies doing?
Thanks for asking. They have figured out how to get out of their beds, which means they now control when we get up instead of the other way around. But they're healthy and happy.
Well, they'll be teenagers before you know it. You'll think that aliens have come down and abducted your beautiful kids and replaced them with terrorists, but you'll get through it. So I want to ask you about, I know I sound like a broken record, the National Center of Excellence for Liquefied Natural Gas Safety, a subject that I know you're familiar with, Mr. Secretary. We're trying to get this built. It's frustrating, of course. It's not altogether your fault. Some days it seems like it takes longer than medical school to get something done around here. But I'd like to ask you where we are. Congress has spoken explicitly. We want this project built. We've appropriated money. It's supposed to be in Louisiana. The people in Louisiana and the universities there have gotten together. They want to put as do I, they want to put the center at McNeese. Other universities will be involved. How do we get this done?
Thank you. That's certainly the path that we're on. I know we've been engaging your staff, and with your engagement of PHMSA, I believe that we are on the path to advance. One thing I would note is that we've taken to heart your observation that the facility that is there now at McNeese State creates an opportunity to leverage what we're seeking to do with those taxpayer dollars that are entrusted to us. So what I can tell you is that we have directed the GSA to provide options in Lake Charles for that LNG Center of Excellence. Of course, we need to make sure that we follow the procurement process, and we need to make sure that there are adequate resources coming in from the center, and we're working with you on that. But certainly recognize the importance and the potential of this facility and the value that it could bring, making sure that we have the safest and most environmentally responsible LNG processes in the world.
So the LNG project is going to be placed in Louisiana, is that right?
Yes.
And within Louisiana, it's going to be placed in Lake Charles, is that right?
That's what we've directed GSA to do, is find sites in Lake Charles that would meet the mission. And again, part of the rationale for that, as you've noted, is that existing center, that academic center, being able to benefit from that co-location. So pending the procurement process, appropriations, and all that, that's the direction that we're headed in.
And you're working with McNeese State University and our other universities, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. In the 1 minute I have left, I'd like your opinion on something. I'm worried about Boeing, not just from a commercial perspective, from a national security perspective. I'd like your thoughts on that.
Well, the importance of Boeing in economic terms and in strategic terms can't be overstated, given the role that they play in American industry, in aerospace, and in not just the regional economy, but really the U.S. economy. I take care to focus on the safety dimension above all else, and certainly as regards the FAA's equities here, it is and can only be strictly about safety. But I also believe that getting the safety picture right, making sure they address their quality control issues and any cultural issues in terms of prioritizing quality and safety, will in turn redound to the benefit of the economic and strategic importance of a firm that large with that important of a role.
Well, we're not just competing against, we meaning Boeing, against Airbus. We're competing against countries now, other countries. I appreciate your candor on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Acting Secretary, welcome. Part of your job, Madam Acting Secretary, is to protect and support employees, is it not?
Yes, sir.
And do you believe that we should protect, do you believe passionately that we should protect and support our employees?
I am passionate about that, sir, yes.
Okay. Do you believe that we should passionately protect and support our employees at the FDIC?
I do believe that all employees should be entitled to fair pay and come home healthy and safe.
Including the FDIC?
Yes.
Okay. Have you read the recent outside report, 234 pages, about the creepy old men at the FDIC?
I have not seen that, Senator.
Have you heard about it?
I have not.
Are you curious about it?
Yes, I am, sure. Yes.
Well, the report, the people who conducted the report, Madam Acting Secretary, and I'm surprised you haven't followed it, asked employees at the agency to phone in complaints. There's 6,000 employees, 500, almost 1 out of 10 employees phoned in complaints. Many of them were sexual complaints, sexual discrimination complaints. One young woman said, my supervisor continuously sends me text messages with photographs of his penis. Is that a labor violation?
I mean, it's horrible.
Well, another employee, an Hispanic employee, said my supervisor required me to recite the Pledge of Allegiance because he said I had to prove I'm an American. Is that a labor violation?
I think, Senator, everything that you're saying is not acceptable in the workplace. The technical question about labor violation is I know they fall under various statutes, but yes.
One young woman said, my supervisor sent me a text message saying, quote, get naked, bitch. Is that a violation, labor violation?
I think it's unacceptable workplace behavior, certainly.
It's pretty bad. One young woman said, my supervisor regularly commented on my breasts and my legs and about his sex life. Is that a labor violation?
I think it's unacceptable behavior.
Yeah, it's pretty bad, isn't it? One young woman sent in a complaint and said, one of my supervisors asked me the following question, quote, does your husband eat you? Close quote. Is that a labor violation?
I mean, it's unacceptable behavior. It's disgusting.
Well, what do you plan on doing about it? Don't you think that that all of the senior management at the FDIC should resign and be prosecuted?
So, Senator, I don't know if a complaint was formally made to the EEOC. That is the federal agency that oversees sexual
complaint. You're the labor secretary, and I know from your behavior you believe in protecting employees. Now, this is as egregious as I've ever seen, and I suspect you've ever seen. And I thought we'd already decided that this is no country for creepy old men. I'm asking you what you're planning. Are you going to call for Martin Gruenberg, who runs the place, to resign? He's been there since 2005, and one or two things are going on. If he says he didn't know about it, he's like a rock, only dumber. Or he condoned this behavior. For the Biden administration, does Me Too apply except at the FDIC? Is that what you're saying?
No, Senator. I mean, I have seen some pretty horrible things. I mean, we see human trafficking and people forced to work in unconscionable conditions.
Yes, ma'am, but what are you going to do about the FDIC?
So,
and how are you going to protect those employees?
Well, they definitely deserve protection. This is where the Department of Labor's authority over the Fair Labor Standards Act, the OSH Act, and other things, the sexual harassment claims that you were talking about fall under a different federal agency. And
so you're just going to ignore it?
No, I mean, but I think that it's important for agencies to operate under the authority that they've been given by Congress.
Don't you think you have a moral imperative to ask Mr. Gruenberg to resign, to quit?
I would say this, Senator. I would say, I think you said that a complaint had been made. I'm assuming it was made to the proper federal agency. I trust that our sister agencies...
But they're coming. I'm just asking you what you're planning on doing, if anything. It doesn't sound to me like you're planning on doing anything to help these young female employees.
Well, now that you've brought it to my attention, I'm happy to make sure that the EOC is aware that there is a case like
But
this.
you're not going to do anything about it as Labor Secretary.
Well, let me say this, Senator. I know that the people of America need a very strong Department of Labor to protect working people across this country. Our authority to investigate, to cite, to end bad labor practices are bound by the authority that's given by you to me. These investigations occur at another agency.
You're not going to do anything, are you?
Oh, I just said I'm happy to reach out to them to make sure they are aware of it, and if they need any
Yeah, but you're
support
not
that I'm
gonna
able
use
to
any of
give.
your power to help those employees.
Thank
are
you, Senator Kennedy.
I want to talk for a moment about seafood. The American people love seafood, as you know. We consume about 7 billion pounds a year, 21 pounds for every man, woman, and child in our country. Do you happen to know what percentage of the seafood that we eat is imported?
I do not.
It's about 94%. Your agency is in charge of inspecting this imported seafood, as you know. Do you happen to know what percentage of that 94% that we import is inspected by your agency?
I don't.
Yeah, it's about 1%.
Yes, it's small, yeah.
And of that 1% that your agency inspects, it finds something wrong with about a third. Let's take crawfish from China or shrimp from India. These countries compete with American producers. These countries subsidize their seafood producers. We don't.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
These countries allow their producers to ignore quotas. These countries allow their producers to ignore where they're supposed to fish. But the worst thing these countries do, they don't abide by environmental regulations. They shoot their products full of antibiotics. If you eat enough shrimp from India, you will grow an extra ear. They also engage in false advertising. No one needs an extra ear, Madam Secretary. Let me, for example, this is Chinese crawfish. Because of the way they produce it, horrible, horrible environmental conditions. And because the government subsidizes it, they can sell it for $8, this. Where in America it costs $14. But look how they do it. The Chinese call it Boudreaux's brand of crawfish tail meat, wild caught. I don't know anybody in China named Boudreaux. Okay? Something's got to be done, Madam Secretary. Yeah. I mean, the people at your seafood import monitoring program are wonderful people.
Yeah.
But all this product is coming in, and it's harmful, and it costs us jobs. Would you share your thoughts with me?
Yeah. So let me say a few things. First of all, I really appreciate your comment, and it's clear we can do more, and I want to work with you to do more. We are extremely focused on transshipment of fish support, from China through Vietnam to the U.S., which is why we impose a countervailing duty on that. We're trying to add the duty wherever we can, even if it goes, from China to another country, Malaysia, Vietnam to the United States. We're very focused on illegal fishing, unregulated fishing, also mostly done by China. Very focused on that, working with CBP on that. But so I share the concern. It's unfair to American workers, it's unfair to American fisheries, it's unsafe, as you say.
And we don't need extra ears.
And we definitely don't need extra
This stuff
ears.
is dangerous.
Yeah. So we have to do more, and I'll commit to doing more.
Last question. I want to follow up on my friend Senator Moran's questions. You're right that the Infrastructure Act says your agency can't set broadband prices. But I keep getting reports that you are. For example, I'm not going to tell you who gave this to me, but in Virginia, when you're negotiating the Virginia plan, your agency required Virginia to have a preset or predeterminable price certain as a condition to receive any BEAD funding. So it sounds to me like, at least in Virginia, the allegation is that your people are setting a price. And I keep hearing this in other states too.
We are not. And if you hear it, you should call me, because we're not. It's not what the law says, and we aren't doing it. And your state, by the way, has done a fantastic job and was, I think, the very first state to be approved and will be the first state to get their money. The fact of the matter is, Alaska is very different than Louisiana. I can't say what's affordable and low cost in Alaska versus Louisiana. It's different. So we're allowing for flexibility, and we're working in an iterative fashion with states to make sure it's low cost. But we're not telling them what low cost is in their state. It's a balance, and like I said, I'm pretty hands-on in this, and if you have concerns about these states, I'm happy to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. I hope you will provide the committee with the explanation of how it is that the seafood promotes the growth of a third ear.
I will.
Because I find that very interesting. Senator Peters.
A couple extra
Senator
fingers,
Heinrich.
too. It's the antibiotics. If you eat enough of this stuff, you become antibiotic resistant, in addition to the extra ear.
Although there are some people I think could use an extra ear.
That's true.
So that they could listen a little better, but all right. Senator Heinrich.
Informed. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. General, as you know, the pumps in our new storm protection system in New Orleans are corroding, and I know the Corps is working on it. Thank you for that. Who did we buy the pumps from?
Sir, it was a joint venture, a contractor.
Who was it?
Sir, I'll get you the specific names of the joint venture.
Well, are they going to stand behind their product?
Sir, we've reached a settlement agreement with the joint venture, and we will begin that work after hurricane season. The interim fixes on the remaining 4 pumps in the system will be complete by the 1st of June, so we'll have every pump available for this hurricane season. Okay. Then we'll go to work on the long-term repairs.
And you said you reached a settlement with your joint venture partner. I assume that's the pump manufacturer.
Yes, sir.
How much money are they putting up?
Sir, I can get you all. I don't have those details here.
Would you? I mean, they need to stand behind their project. This project's brand new, and the pumps are corroding. And I really would like to see more about the settlement that you worked out with them.
Okay. Yes, sir. We're going to deliver on a 35-year design life. That's our commitment to you.
Yes, sir. I want to ask you about another project, General. I know you're familiar with it. That's the grain elevator project in Wallace, Louisiana, by Greenfield, Louisiana. It's a $225 million project. It's not a petrochemical plant. It's a grain elevator project. We'll export grain. It's going to create about 100 new jobs, good jobs, about $75,000 apiece. The community wants it. The Planning and Zoning Commission in the community just approved the rezoning. But we've reached a point in this country where it takes longer to go to medical school, or it takes longer to get a permit for a project than it does to go to medical school. And when are we going to make a decision? The project needs a permit from the Corps. I'm not telling you what decision to make. This company's already spent $25 million, and they're going on, what, a couple of years? It's fish or cut bait time. Can you tell me when we're going to have a decision from the Corps?
Yes, sir. So soon. This is a controversial permit. There's parties for and against this particular project. So the current friction that we're working through, sir, is adherence to the National Historic Preservation Act, specifically Section 106, on 6 historic properties that are in the region. So we've got the information that we needed from all of our consulting parties. Colonel Jones is going through that now. He will make the decision, likely here very soon, on whether or not that needs to be elevated to the keeper of the registry of the National Register for decision. We expect to have that decision very soon.
Can I ask you a question, General? This is the Corps' call, is it not? I mean, I know if the historic preservation folks, they're entitled to input, but they don't have veto power, do they?
Sir, I don't know. Whether or not it gets elevated, I believe, is Colonel Jones's call.
Yeah, it's the Corps' call. And I know there's some people who don't want it. I understand that. And they're entitled to their opinion. But at some point, the Corps' got to make a decision. And you're not going to make everybody happy here. But time is money. And that's all I'm asking is that you go ahead and make a decision. Give me a quick update. Do I have any time left? Thank you, Senator Hoeven. I love Hoeven. Can you give me a quick update on the Morganza to the Gulf of Mexico project?
Yes, sir. Yesterday, we completed the initial NEPA work. They signed the finding of no significant impact, and we completed the plans and specs for what we call Reach A. So that's the 5-mile gap on the southwest side of this 98-mile system. We'll get that contract out for solicitation next and intend to award a construction contract in July.
Okay. No, I got 35 seconds, Senator Hoeven tells me. Quick update on the St. Tammany Parish, Louisiana feasibility study.
Yes, sir. I will take that chief's report briefing from the New Orleans district on the 28th of May. We'll sign that, and we'll get that to Congress for their consideration in Word of 24.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Thank you. I know, but Senator Hoeven can have my time.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Kennedy of Louisiana is recognized.
I hope Senator Al Franken is watching today. If it weren't for double standards around this place, there wouldn't be any standards at all. Mr. Grunberg, have you ever heard the expression, a fish rots from the head down?
Yes, Senator.
I understand I listened carefully to your testimony. Do I understand you to assert that you believe you're the person to clean up the FDIC?
I do, Senator.
Do you also believe that Elvis is alive?
Not to my knowledge, Senator.
Do you also believe in Bigfoot?
No, sir.
Have you read this report?
Yes, sir.
You've been the chairman of the FDIC 10 of the last 13 years, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
And you've been there for 20 years almost, haven't you?
Nearly, yes, sir.
And this sleaze has been going on for decades, has it not?
I think the report makes that finding, Senator.
Did you read the part of the report where one of your supervisors described one of your young and female employees as being, quote, like a grizzly bear with tits, close quote?
I've read the report, Senator.
Did you read the part of the report where one of your supervisors asked a young female employee quote, does your husband eat you? Did you read that?
I have read the report, Senator.
Did you read the part of the report where one young employee said her supervisor sent her a text? You know what the text said? Quote, get naked, bitch. Did you read that?
Yes, sir.
Did you read the part of the report where one of your supervisors turned to one of your Hispanic employees and asked him to recite the Pledge of Allegiance to prove that he is an American? Did you read that?
I read it, sir.
You're not going to be able to clean up the FDIC because you're going to be too busy defending yourself in court. I'm going to introduce a bill to extend the statute of limitations to allow every employee at the FDIC to file suit over this sexual abuse and this sexual discrimination and this racism. And you're going to be spending all your time in court. Now, the Cleary-Gottlieb report doesn't think you're the person to clean up the FDIC, does it?
I don't know that the report reaches that conclusion, but it certainly has critical comments in regard to me, Senator.
Well, I mean, the FDIC report says that it says that even your senior leaders feel, quote, disrespected, disparaged, and treated unfairly by you. Did I quote that correctly?
Yeah, I have read the report, Senator.
And the Cleary-Gottlieb report, it goes on to say that your long tenure and reputation for losing your temper and bullying people, quote, presents unique challenges, close quote, for you to change the agency. Did you read that part?
I have read it, Senator.
And the Cleary-Gottlieb report also says it questions whether you have the, quote, moral authority to do so. Is that correct?
I have read the report, Senator.
Yes. You fixing this agency, Mr. Gruenberg, is like asking, it's like asking Alec Baldwin to conduct a course in gun safety. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. And Mr. Sue, you ought to be ashamed of yourself for acting like a lickspittle here today, trying to defend this gentleman. Have you ever read a worse report, Mr. Gruenberg, in all your years?
It's a bad report, Senator.
Yeah, it's bad. Look, I could go through this report. I'm embarrassed to have to even read some of these allegations. These folks on the first row behind you, are they FDIC employees?
Some of them are, Senator, yes.
Would you like to turn around and apologize to the female employees sitting behind you at the FDIC?
I have, Senator.
Would you like to do that now?
If you ask me to, I will.
I think you should.
I apologize.
And now I think you ought to resign. I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Smith from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's ironic to me that my Republican...
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Granholm, do you believe that the world can achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 without nuclear energy playing a substantial role?
I do not.
Okay. I agree with you. I want to go back to my thesis that I hope I articulated it reasonably well. But we don't have an overarching plan or analysis for achieving CO2. In my opinion, we're just throwing money at it. Let's suppose Professor Lundberg is right, 27 trillion a year. That's worldwide to achieve carbon neutrality and maintain it through 2100. Let's assume America's share, we produce 15% of CO2 emissions. That makes our share about $4 trillion a year. That's, I don't know, 8 to 10% of our GDP. Doesn't sound like much when you talk about it that way, but it's still $4 trillion a year, every year. That's money we can't spend on health care or feeding people, housing. What happens if we start spending $4 trillion a year each year for every year through just 2050? And China doesn't do its part, or Russia doesn't do its part, or India doesn't do its part, or Vietnam or Thailand. How much is our money going to reduce world temperatures, or the increase in world temperatures? The answer is zero, isn't it?
No, I don't think it's zero, but I do know that this is
How
why
much
we
is it?
have global
But how much
efforts.
is it?
This is why we have all 190 countries signed on to get to net zero by 2050.
I know they've signed on, and excuse me for
and countries
interrupting.
are moving in that direction, sir.
But they're not doing, I'm asking you, and I hope they do it, okay? If it turns out that the scientists are right. I'm not saying they are or they aren't. It's just that the whole topic has become so politicized. But we never talk about what happens if they don't and what is the likelihood that they will. And let me ask you again, if we spend $4 trillion a year, every year, until 2050 to achieve carbon neutrality in the United States, and President Putin and President Xi and Prime Minister Modi say, I don't think so. I think I'm going to spend that on domestic needs in my countries. How much are we going to reduce world temperatures?
With respect, I'm not going to buy into the hypothetical because they have said, I don't know about Putin, but the president of China and Prime Minister Modi have all made commitments to move in this direction and are spending money to move in this direction. But the better question is, or a parallel question would be, what happens if we don't?
Well, I'm interested in my question, though. Well, you're good, but I don't want you to change the subject. Have you ever known President Xi to lie?
Well, I am telling you what is in
lies on
the
occasion,
plan
doesn't he?
and what we have seen in terms of their spending. They have spent about $400 billion a year so far. That was, I think, in 2023 on renewable energy. So
What about Russia?
Spending.
What about
They're
Russia?
Spending. Russia,
You
I can't
honestly
speak for.
believe that
I don't have the information on Russia.
President
They're
Putin-
not very transparent. But all of these countries have signed on to the goal. And my point is, if we don't, sir, if we don't, we will be spending globally $38 trillion a year to clean up after the extreme weather events that are happening because of climate change.
But you use that figure, but I've seen no basis for it. Professor,
I can send you that.
Professor Lundberg says it's much less than that. But here's my point: do we just start spending the $4 trillion a year and spend it blindly every year like clockwork? Or at what point, if China's not pulling its load, or Russia, or Vietnam, or Sub-Saharan Africa, at what point do we say, what model do we have in place to say, whoa, wait a minute, we're wasting our money because they're not spending theirs?
I believe that the United States and its leadership in this world, as well as our allies, are not going to throw in the towel. That this is too important in terms of our world, in terms of climate change going into the future and the devastating impact it is having right now, much less in 2050.
I'm out of time, but do you trust, look me in the eye, do you trust Vladimir Putin?
No, I don't trust him.
Or President Xi Jinping to do anything other than what is in their best political interest and the power that they achieve in the world? Do you really believe that?
And in China's interest, it is in their interest to move down this path because they are experiencing extreme heat waves and death as a result of climate change. And this is why they're spending what they are. And this is why they want to dominate these clean energy technologies, because they see an economic advantage for them to be leading in this. So, no, I don't trust what they say, but we will verify.
But you're willing, well, I've gone over. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Madam Secretary. I'll try to come back. Or
Thank
not.
you. Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Bertinelli. I'm directing these comments to you because you, of course, are the director of the NIH, but I could also direct them to each member of this distinguished panel. Let me state a few things that I think most fair-minded people would agree are facts. The National Institutes of Health, or more to the point, the men and women there, are one of the most extraordinary collections of minds in the world, maybe in all of human history. Your work, their work, has saved billions of lives. Their work, your work, has improved the quality of life for billions of people, not just in America, but worldwide. Additional fact, the National Institutes of Health is part of, at least in America, but I think the world as well, is part of the institution of public health. Another fact in my judgment, as a result of the pandemic, the institution of public health, at least in America, and I think in some respects throughout the world, has been tarnished. And that's dangerous. That's very dangerous for America, for the world, if we have another public health crisis. I don't care to partake in who's at fault for that, or depending upon your perspective, who receives the credit for that. I'd like to suggest that we do something about it and that we learn from it. And I think the NIH is the perfect group of men and women with the requisite credibility to do that. Now, here are my suggestions. Number one, the NIH needs to clear the air on gain-of-function research. I would gently suggest that you could do it in a symposium. You could do it at an extended press conference with some of your bright minds making presentations. Be technical, but also speak directly to the American people in a way they can understand. Tell them what gain-of-function research is. Tell them how it is funded. Tell them what research projects the American taxpayers are funding. Tell them what, if any, America's involvement was with the gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab. Tell them the benefits of gain-of-function research. Explain to them the risks. And be transparent. That needs to be done. And I think the NIH could lead it. Number two, at a different symposium or extended press conference, I would like to see the NIH take the lead in speaking to the world and to the American people about what we learned from the pandemic. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? Here's why we got it wrong. Here's why we got it right. Here's how we saved lives. Here's how we could have saved more lives if we'd known then what we know now. The American people, they don't read Aristotle every day, but they're too busy earning a living, but they get it. You know, hindsight is wonderful. I think if you would consider doing those two things, we could remove some of the tarnish on the institution of public health in America. And I'll conclude with this point. I know there are risks here. I know some of you are thinking, you know, what planet did Kennedy just parachute in from? Why do I want to get mixed up in this political hot mess? Because it's important. And it's not going away, folks. Neither one of those topics is going away. So I would gently suggest you put those extraordinary minds to work and consider doing those two things.
So on behalf of all of us, thank you very much, Senator.
Senator Britt.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, Vice Chairwoman. Appreciate you holding this hearing today, and thank each and every one of you for appearing before.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Madam Secretary, and Madam Secretary for being here. I want to apologize in advance. I've got a couple of other committees going, so I'm going to be in and out. I'd like to hear you talk today about a couple of things. First, Madam Secretary, I'm very disappointed in the administration's decision to place a moratorium on LNG permits. I don't see how that is going to further the goal of climate change. I do see how that is going to hurt America's energy independence, but equally important, it's going to hurt our friends in Europe. It's going to help our enemies, like Qatar. It looks political to me, and I'm hoping you'll be able to address that. I'd also like to talk today about whether the administration would consider, so far it hasn't, it's considered it, but it hasn't done it, advancing petroleum pit production. We've done better, but it's still not enough. I'm disappointed that the administration hasn't emphasized nuclear energy funding. I don't understand how we're going to achieve carbon neutrality without advanced small modular nuclear reactors. And the administration doesn't seem to want to talk too much about the benefits. Of course, there are costs as well, but the benefits of nuclear energy. It seems to have worked out well in countries like France, which sees its energy future, including a big role for nuclear energy. So those are the kinds of things that I'm hoping we can talk about today. But I want to end my remarks, Secretary Granholm, with a more general thought. I consider you to be one of the most intelligent and accomplished appointees by President Biden. That doesn't mean I agree with all of the positions that you have taken. I don't know to what extent you have taken those positions because you believe them or because you have been directed to take them by the White House. But I also feel like in our debate over energy transition, we're missing a major piece of the puzzle. And that's an explanation to the American people about what we're doing, why we're doing it, the costs of doing it, and the benefits, and the trade-offs. And I think you and your department should take on that responsibility. Let me try to be more specific. There's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Bjorn Lomborg. I'm not saying that he has all the answers, but he is a visiting professor at Stanford. He's head of a think tank in Europe called the Copenhagen Consensus. He is basically a climate change economist. And in peer-reviewed studies, he predicts, for example, that in order for us to be carbon neutral, and not just the United States and the world, by 2050, and to maintain it through 2100, it will cost about 1% of the world's, not America's, but the world's GDP. Now that doesn't sound like much until you reduce it to raw dollars. That's $27 trillion a year. That's the cost. He raises the question of whether we should spend that $27 trillion or take a portion of it and instead use it to combat the effects of climate change, which he estimates we could do successfully worldwide for $1 trillion a year. Now, you may not agree with his numbers or his analysis, but a cost-benefit analysis is worth pursuing instead of just throwing a bunch of money at the problem. For example, he raises the question, he believes that in order for China to become carbon neutral by 2050 and maintain its carbon neutrality through 2100, it will cost China $1 trillion a year. China's not spending $1 trillion a year. China, in fact, has increased its carbon emissions 300% by 1990. He raises the question, it's a fair question, what happens if China doesn't cooperate? What's the impact on world carbon neutrality? If it doesn't cooperate, is America wasting all its money? He raises the question about Russia. He thinks that Russia needs to start spending today $400 to $500 billion a year and spend that amount every year between now and 2100 to achieve carbon neutrality. It's about 3 times what Russia spends on its military. Does anyone in this room honestly believe that President Putin tomorrow is going to stand up and say, well, I'm going to stop spending money on my military and start spending it on CO2 emissions? And Professor Lomborg raises the question of, well, what happens if they don't? What happens if India doesn't cooperate? Developing countries, they want the same things as us. They want to be able to eat and live indoors, and their children to have better lives. Are we going to have to pay developing countries for their energy transition, particularly when it's cheaper for them to advance their societies using fossil fuels? These are the kind of questions that need to be hit head on. And we're not doing it. And this administration, with all due respect, has not done it. All we're doing is throwing money at a problem. And I asked, I think it was your deputy secretary, Madam Secretary, about a year or so ago, I said, if the United States government achieves carbon neutrality by 2050, and we spend the money to do it, how much will that lower world temperatures? Or how much will that decrease the increase in world temperatures? He said, I can't guarantee you that it'll lower temperatures at all, because it depends on other countries. And I think that needs to be addressed head on, and I think you're the person to do it. I don't know if the White House will let you, but the world is yearning for this. I'm going on too long. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but people are starting to figure out that they're going to have to pay for this. We see it in Germany right now. I mean, Germany said, well, we're just going to require everybody to convert to heat pumps. Now, all of a sudden, people say, well, you mean I've got to go buy a $15,000 heat pump? And so they're pushing back. And in order to have people buy into an energy transition, they've got to understand that there's an overarching plan. I'm sorry for going on so long, Madam Chair.
No. Okay, so in fairness, Senator Kennedy.
Sorry, Martin. Mr. Director, welcome. I bet you just love talking about where to put the FBI building, don't you? Probably one of your favorite topics. I've got two questions. Number one, if you took the major Mexican drug cartels, which also traffic people into the United States, and turned them upside down and shook them, President Lopez Obrador would fall out of their pockets, wouldn't he?
Well, I don't know that I can comment on a specific individual's corruption other than through cases that we bring, but I understand the point that you're making, for sure.
We're not getting much cooperation out of Mexico, are we?
Let me put it this way. While we have had some successes here and there in terms of extraditions and so forth, and I appreciate those, and I'm grateful to our Mexican partners for those, especially at the working level, we need a whole lot more from Mexico than we've gotten in terms of shutting down the cartels and stopping the flow of the precursors. I mean, I could go on and on. So I'm grateful for the successes we have had, but we need a heck of a lot more, is the way I would answer that.
Why don't we use leverage of what I call NAFTA 2 to try to encourage the president of Mexico to cooperate more?
Yeah, I mean, NAFTA, of course, is a trade agreement, and I'm not really an expert on trade relations. Certainly, from an FBI perspective, we welcome every tool in the toolbox to try to improve the relationship and the cooperation, and I'm hopeful that the Mexican government will see the value of building on the successes we have had and take it to the level that it needs to be, because it's not where it needs to be.
Okay. Here's my second question. We know that Jeffrey Epstein, who is now deceased, and Ms. Maxwell, his associate, who's in prison, were engaged in a conspiracy of sex trafficking with minors. So were others. It's been widely reported. What's the FBI doing to investigate the other people that were involved in these sex trafficking rings?
Well, I'm not sure that I can confirm any specific individual.
Well, let me put it this way. Let me give you some facts, widely reported. Jeffrey Epstein had video surveillance in all of his homes and on his private island. And there have been articles after articles from witnesses who have said he videotaped sex acts with prominent people because he was trying to incur, with young girls that he had procured to try to incur favor with those prominent people and potentially to be able to blackmail them. Now, that's a fact. And the FBI and other federal agencies have raided his houses. Do you have those tapes?
Again, I can't discuss the specifics of our law enforcement operations related to Mr. Epstein or Ms. Maxwell, but obviously we had very active investigation related to both of them. But whether it extends to other people, I'm not sure that's something that I can comment on.
A suit was filed yesterday against one of those prominent people by one of the young women sex trafficked, allegedly, said he was part of the ring. It's on the front page, I don't know, is this New York Times, Wall Street Journal? And we keep seeing article after article after article, and we keep hearing about prominent person after prominent person after prominent person. I just want to know if these prominent people are above the law and are going to be and aren't being investigated, or is the FBI investigating them?
Well, no one is above the law, number one. As to whether specific people are being investigated, that's not something that I, as I'm sure you can appreciate, can engage on here. We've devoted significant resources to the investigation.
Is it ongoing?
I'm not sure there's anything I can share with you on that, but let me see if we can get back to you and provide a little more information.
Well, for example, these allegations in this lawsuit, the civil action.
Yeah, I haven't seen
the article.
It.
It'll trigger your gag reflex. Is the FBI going to investigate that?
Well, again, I haven't seen the article, but I would be happy to take a look at it and take it back and see if it's part of something
I'd just like to know.
I share your.
Yeah, is the FBI still investigating this, or are these prominent people going to go scot-free?
I'm not sure that I can tell you whether or not there is ongoing work being devoted to this. I would be happy to take a look at the specific article. I share your disgust at Mr. Epstein's conduct and Ms. Maxwell's conduct.
And others.
The whole operation.
Okay. Thanks, Madam Chair. Sorry, Martin. You're a fine American anyway.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy.
I'll try to be as quick as I can. Mr. Chairman, welcome. You know, thanks for being here. You're both looking well. Chairman Genzo, do you remember, I know you do, back in October of 2020, Ant Group, a subsidiary of Alibaba, announced an IPO. And everybody was all a titter, you know. Going to invest in this extraordinary IPO because Alibaba is such a successful company. And the CEO of Alibaba got crossways with President Xi. And unsurprisingly, President Xi won. And he canceled the IPO, he meaning President Xi, for Ant Group, the subsidiary of Alibaba. And of course, after the announcement of the cancellation was made, Alibaba stock dropped about 8%. You remember that? I did some checking, and 2 days before the announcement that the IPO was canceled, a bunch of insiders at Alibaba dumped about $150 million worth of Alibaba stock, therefore avoiding an 8% loss, which other investors who didn't know about the IPO cancellation had to swallow. Insider trading. And I said, how can this be? Well, our law provides, I'm not blaming it on you, this is Congress's fault. Our law says that if you are the CEO of an American company and you sell your stock, you've got to report it to the SEC within 2 days of the sale, and you've got to report it electronically. You can't use snail mail. And you post it there in front of God and country on your internet, on your website. But a foreign executive doesn't have to do this. The foreign executive, he has weeks to inform you that he's executed an insider trail, and he can then send it to you by snail mail. And it's not even posted on the website. So Senator Van Hollen and I have a bill to basically say the foreign investors and the foreign executives have to follow the same rules as the American executives. I mean, insider trading is insider trading. Will you support that? We talked to my Democratic colleagues. I think that you're addressing something, Senator Van Hollen, and you are addressing a gap in our current regime. We have about 1,000 of these foreign private issuers, and you're right that they don't have to currently file within 2 days electronically their trades, and I think that would help close a gap. There's another gap that's actually a 25-year-old rule, and I've asked staff to look at, called Regulation Fair Disclosure, or FD, when it was under Chair Levitt some years ago that he put it in place. A simple concept. If you share material, non-public information to analysts or Wall Street or to the press, you've got to put it out to everybody. And it's helped protect the public. Fair disclosure. But guess what? There's an exemption there for foreign private issuers as well. So I've asked staff to take a close look. We'd have to go through notice and comment rulemaking to change that. Good idea. Well, we're going to try to move our bill by UC, unanimous consent. I can't imagine anybody will object, but I've seen it happen before. So any help you can give us. I wanted to, last weekend, I know I need to get a life, but I sat down and read Judge Englehart's opinion in the, I forget the name of the case, National Association of Private Funds Managers v. SEC. It's the private funds rule case. And I thought the opinion was, regardless of what you think about the result, I thought it was well-reasoned, well-written, far-reaching. And I wanted to get your thought, and I know the Fifth Circuit en banc can change it, and the Supreme Court might review it, but I wanted to get your thoughts about the consequences of the holding in that case, holdings, on your other rulemaking procedures. I'm glad that you read the case, and of course it's in the Fifth Circuit, it's in New Orleans. So. Yeah. But we're still reviewing and thinking about our next steps. But I think that what it said, and Senator Haggerty and I were talking about it, is this new provision 14 years ago in Dodd-Frank, Section 913 of that. Which is part of the Advisors Act. Part of the Advisors Act. You might remember it's 211H of the Advisors Act. Yeah. That talks about new authorities about investors. The court read that to be just about retail investors. And so we're looking at that, but if you're asking me, that means that narrows that authority. Of course, we do everything within the law and how courts interpret it, but we're just still thinking about the next steps. But it would narrow that authority to, I think as they read it, I'm using a colloquial word, retail investors. One of the things, Mr. Chairman, that got my attention, and you can debate whether it's part of the holding or not, but the court seemed to seize on the fact that in terms of your fraud rule, based on the SEC's experience, out of the thousands and thousands of these private funds, you've only found 0.5%, not 5%, 0.5% instances of fraud, but yet the requirement to comply with the private funds rule was going to cost the private funds industry over $5 billion a year. Obviously, it was a cost-benefit analysis. That made sense to me. What do you think?
Well, with all respect to any court and so forth, we put certain things in a filing and we listed, I don't remember, a couple dozen examples. They're exemplars. We in our enforcement, and what we do in enforcement is we have cases when it comes to our attention and we pursue that fraud, and then we either settle or we litigate. And so we were giving some of those examples. But again, we're still looking at that case. We're looking at the opinion, trying to determine next steps. But I think that in any area in the law, if we have examples of fraud, that's to help protect the public. And it's not whether there's tens of thousands of them, but what in that case, a couple dozen real cases that we were able to point to.
But the question was being raised, and I'm going to shut it down, Chris. Cost benefit, okay? And the court was saying that there are only 0.5%, half of 1%, instances of fraud based on SEC experience. But the SEC issued a rule that was going to cost everybody $5 billion a year, and does that make sense? And I think it was raising that issue.
Well, we address ourselves to cost benefit, I think, in a very serious way as to what problem we're trying to solve. In this case, what we were trying to solve is information for the limited partners investing in private funds, and behind those limited partners, of course, are pension funds, endowments, your state pension funds probably in your states. To have quarterly reports to them on the performance fees and arrangements with other investors. And this was not meant to be public information. It was just too private information to those. I think that would promote greater competition and efficiency in that market. But again, the court had a different view on this important Section 913.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
From Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Romero, I know you've read the Cleary-Gottlieb report. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
I watched a lot of powerful people in this town try to cover it up. They said, oh, it's bad, but don't worry. The FDIC chairman will fix it. This was the same FDIC chairman who had been at the agency since God was a corporal and under whom all this stuff happened. And fortunately, that point of view didn't prevail. Here's the way I read the report. 97 people at that agency reported 145 separate incidents of sexual assaults. 91 others reported 141 separate incidents of gender or sexuality-based discrimination. 187 people reported 320 separate incidents of verbal abuse. Over 500 people, about 10% of the people at the agency, came forward about discrimination, harassment, mistreatment they faced at the FDIC. Now, I listened to you say all the right words. And you talked about accountability. And you talked about refurbishing the tarnished reputation of the agency. And you talked about listening. And I appreciate all that. But the phrase that got my attention was, send a clear message that this won't be tolerated. If you want to do that, what you need to do before you do your listening tours or all that other stuff, you need to investigate every one of these allegations, every single one, and find out if they're true. And if they are true, then somebody ought to be, the person who's responsible should be fired, should be sued, and or should be prosecuted. And then you'll have a cleaner agency. Now, I don't have any questions. You're either going to do it or you're not. But I think a lot of the members of the committee agree with me. We're going to be watching. Every time the FDIC comes before the banking committee, as long as I'm on it, I'm going to ask you about progress with specificity. Ms. Crenshaw, this climate risk disclosure rule that you're so proud of, how much is that going to cost the companies that you regulate?
Senator, on a per issuer basis over 10 years, I think the economic analysis was roughly $250,000 to $750,000 on a per issuer basis over 10 years.
What's the total cost, please?
I don't know the total.
You have no
cost.
idea?
Well, it's going to depend very much on the individual issuer.
So you impose this rule on every single entity that you regulate and you don't know the total cost?
Well, Senator, it depends on the individual issuer. We put in place.
You don't know the total cost?
It's going to depend on the individual issuer.
You don't know, do you?
Because it's going to depend. I don't think there's necessarily.
It's going to be billions of dollars, isn't it?
I don't believe on a per issuer basis that it's going to be.
I didn't say per issue. I mean the total cost.
Senator,
it's going to be billions of dollars, isn't it?
I don't know, Senator.
Yeah, it is, and you know it is. How much, after asking all these businesses to spend billions of dollars, how much is that going to lower world temperatures?
I don't know. It's not designed to it's not designed to lower temperatures, Senator. It's designed to give investors information so that they can assess risk.
Why don't you just send them an email?
Well, I think there's a lot of securities laws that would prohibit us just sending an email.
Let me be sure I understand. You voted to spend, look, we all want clean air and bright water. You voted to spend, to require the people regulated and the entities regulated by the FDIC billions and billions of dollars, even though you can't say really how much it's going to cost. You're just going to make them do it. And you can't tell me today how much it's going to lower world temperatures?
Again, that's not what the rule is designed for, Senator.
Well, what's it designed for?
It's designed
to harass people?
To give investors information to
virtue
assess risk,
signaling?
To appropriately allocate their capital as they see fit.
I mean, this is insanity. You have a personal supply chain. Suppose we passed a law that said periodically you've got to report personally the carbon emissions of the people who make all the clothes you buy. You buy clothes, don't you?
I do, Senator.
And the car you drive, and the house you live in, and the food you eat. How much do you think that would cost?
We carved out all of the smaller entities, EGCs, SRCs, from the final rule to ensure that...
If you think everybody ought to report, why don't you make this rule applicable to everybody at the SEC personally and see how they like it?
Again, we carved out the smallest. We took into account the comment file, and we tried
Tell me
to
again how much this
balance
is
it.
going to lower world temperatures. I don't know if I remember asking.
I think you know the answer to that, Senator Kennedy. Thank
Zero.
You. Your time has expired. Senator Cortez Masto's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Crenshaw, unfortunately, you weren't able to answer.
Senator Kennedy of Louisiana is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rosen, and thanks to all of you for being here. Mr. Rosen, NVIDIA makes probably the most advanced artificial intelligence chips, does it not?
NVIDIA does produce advanced chips, yes, Senator.
And those chips are highly coveted because they can perform the massive computations needed to train AI systems, don't they?
I believe so, yes, Senator.
Yeah. And we have export controls on those chips, do we not?
We do, and that's a process led by my colleague,
Right.
Ms. Kendler.
And we prohibit those chips from being sold to China. Is that correct?
I don't know exactly what chips are prohibited, defer to Ms. Kendler, but I know there are controls on the export.
You don't know
advanced-
whether the advanced NVIDIA artificial intelligence chips are prohibited from being sold to China?
So, Senator, my understanding is that they are, but that is export controls. It lies with my colleague at the Department of Commerce.
So how come we're selling them? We're allowing them to be sold to China?
Senator, I would respectfully defer. I don't oversee export controls. I oversee inbound investment into the United States.
Well, you control investment security, don't you?
I do, and as
All right, let me ask Ms. Kindler. How come we're allowing them to be sold to China?
Senator, our advanced computing controls from last October and the October before, they're absolutely targeted at the most advanced chips, as you noted. We are controlling them for export to China, and we look together with Department of Defense, Energy, and State at where they're going.
Yes, ma'am, but if you go on the internet, you'll find 70 distributors, not 70 distributors, which will sell NVIDIA's supposedly restricted chips to China. And in fact, some of them will sell to China the entire servers. They cost about $300,000 a piece. They've got 8 chips in them. Isn't that a fact?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the website that you're referring to, but what I can tell you...
I'm referring to 70. Do you read the Wall Street Journal?
On occasion, yes.
You should read this article. They've identified at least 70 distributors, and they have confirmed that these chips are being sold to China.
Senator...
I mean, this is very disturbing. One estimate, not according to the Center for a New American Security, it estimates that the median number of A1 chips being sold already to China at 12,500. Isn't that correct?
Senator, any diversion of our controls would be a matter for export enforcement, and we are tracking that very closely.
But you're not aware that 12,500 have been sold?
Senator, we track all sorts of data through our analytic capabilities to understand illicit procurement networks. That's very important to our work.
But you don't
it's something
know about
we're cracking down on.
12,500?
I can't speak to the specific report that you're referring to, sir.
Well, you need to read the paper. No disrespect. These chips have been sold, and it's been confirmed, to China's most elite universities. They've been sold to the state research powerhouse, Chinese Academy of Science, haven't they? Do you know anything about that?
Senator, we look at license applications and determine whether they're consistent with national security. If it's not consistent with national security, we do not approve it.
Well, all you got to do is go on, get your computer out, and go on Google and search. And you'll find 70 distributors that are selling these restricted chips that you're not shutting down. And the Wall Street Journal has confirmed all of this.
Sir, we would add entities like that to our entity list as a regulatory action. We would also...
But you haven't done it yet.
We would also have our enforcement colleagues investigate these kinds of allegations.
Were you aware of this before I raised it today?
Senator, I certainly am aware that when our laws are effective, illicit procurement networks stand up to violate them.
Were you aware of these 70 distributors and the thousands and thousands that have been sold right there on the internet in front of God and country, bigger than Dallas? Was your agency in charge of enforcing this aware of that?
Senator, I'd be happy to connect you with our enforcement team to talk about this in more detail.
Team?
Yes, sir.
I mean, who's on first? What's on second? We've got export controls here. And all you got to do is go on the internet, and China buys them.
The export...
Are you aware? Were you aware of this before I raised it today?
Senator Kennedy, you've made your point clear. I share your concerns. I think this is one reason why BIS needs more funds. Senator Smith from Minnesota is recognized.
Well, can I just say one more point?
You certainly may.
I don't think they need more money.
No.
I think they need people that talk to each other and know how to use an internet and know how to read articles in the Wall Street Journal. This is not, you don't have to be an astrophysicist here.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Abate, am I saying your name right?
Yes, Senator, thank you.
You are the Deputy Director of the FBI, is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Is there any doubt in your mind or in the collective mind of the FBI that President Trump was shot in the ear by a bullet fired by the assassin crooks?
Senator, there is absolutely no doubt in the FBI's mind
it
whether former President Trump was hit with a bullet and wounded in the ear. No doubt, there never has been.
Okay.
I've been part of this investigation since the very beginning, and that has never been raised.
You're sure?
Yes.
It wasn't a space laser.
No.
It wasn't a murder hornet.
Absolutely not.
It wasn't Sasquatch.
No, Senator.
It was a bullet.
It was a bullet, Senator. 100%.
Fired by crooks
Yes, sir.
that hit President Trump in the ear and almost killed him.
100%, Senator.
Okay, glad we cleared that up. I don't want to get off. Let me use my final 30 seconds to ask you. I listened to my good friend, the chairman, give his opening statement. Do you think inflation was caused by corporate greed?
I hate to comment on something the chairman was speaking about.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, so I will just say, we see at the Fed, we see inflation as when there's an imbalance between supply and demand. And we use our tools to work on the demand side of that and bring it back into line with supply.
I got 2 seconds. So when are you going to lower interest rates?
I'm today not going to be sending any signals about the timing of any future actions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.